Hello, Uncle Mikey here, Whiskey Delta Zero Oscar Mike, and we're doing some ham radio today. We're doing some parks on the air. I'm here at Fort Snelling State Park. I'll show you a little more of where I'm at in a moment, and I'll show you my setup so you can see it. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about what this channel is going to be. I am a huge nerd. You probably guessed that from the fact that here I am at a park, and what am I doing with my day at the park? I'm going to play radio, and I'm recording me playing radio. It hit me very suddenly. Like last November, I just got bit by the bug, and the next thing I knew, I had an extra class license. So one of the first things I want to talk about is that it's not that hard. If you think you're interested, please follow this channel. Please follow other YouTubers, because that's how I got into this. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, is because YouTube is a large part of how I became a ham operator and got into the hobby. And I want to give back a little bit. I want to show off how I do things. There's room in here for a lot of different ways of doing it, and a lot of different people telling you how they do it. And some people are very slick production, and some people are really just out in the park with their cameras, and maybe it'll get slicker later, and maybe it won't, and we'll all find out together. So anyway, you can see a little bit behind me the backdrop I've got here. I'm at Fort Snelling, which is in Parks on the Air parlance. It's Park US 2482. And this is a lot of what I do. So a lot of what you see me do here on the channel is probably going to be here at this park or at other similar parks. This park is very close to home for me, so it's one reason that I come here a lot. It's become my default. It's literally 10 minutes from my house. I can come here to operate for a couple of hours or for a half an hour. Less than that, it's not really worth it, but I come here almost casually at this point, because I've got the way to put a mag mount on the car and an antenna on the car and just operate from the car very easily. Is that something I say everyone should do? No. That's one of the points I'm going to be making all throughout. There's no particular thing you should do, except follow the rules, have fun, help other people have fun. That's about it. As long as you're doing that, you're pretty much doing it right. Point is, there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a lot of room for you to find your own joy in this hobby. And you don't have to do what I do, and I don't have to do what the other guy does. And if someone tells you, hey, you're doing it wrong because you're not doing it the way I'm doing it, they're wrong. So all of that said, I still want to provide some examples. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how I'm doing it today. Here we go. So here's my setup. I didn't record myself setting it up because, I mean, that can be interesting, but today it was actually kind of frustrating, and I'll show you why in a minute. This part was not particularly frustrating. This part's easy. This is just hooking up cables, one thing to another. You can see, kind of see, the radio is already running. I'm listening to FT8. I always start out with FT8 because FT8 tells me how well my signal's getting out. Tells me if my antenna is working at all. And that was important today because today I'm using something I've never used before, an antenna that I built. Almost everything about this antenna except the mast, I built myself, and I'm lousy about tools. I don't know what I'm doing with tools half the time, and I still built this myself because it's not hard. So if you notice that the audio quality just changed, it's because I switched which microphone I was using. I was using the camera's own microphone. I have the lapel mic on, I just wasn't using it because I'm dumb. Anyway, let's go over the components I've got here. I've got the radio, of course. This is a Yaesu FT-710. I highly recommend this radio. Nobody's paying me to say that. I just think this radio is awesome. I had this radio recommended to me by folks on the Ham Radio Crash Course Discord, and I have never once looked back or regretted it. It is 10 pounds, so you're not going to lug this up a mountain unless you're a lot stronger than I am, but for a car operation, or even if I wanted to go sit down at one of the park benches here in the park, this radio is fantastic. It's 100 watts out of the gate. It's got great ears. It's extremely sensitive. Can't say enough good about it. It's lovely. That's the battery, despite the fact that it's got a Heil ham radio sticker on it, which makes you think maybe it's audio equipment. It's not. That's the battery. It's a Bioenno 20 amp hour battery, 12 volt nominal, which means it comes out of the gate probably 14 and a half. Which you have to be careful about with some radios, but the FT-710 is perfectly happy to start out with that. This will last me hours. If I'm careful, if I keep my power down, if I'm not going 100 watts all the time, this will last me couple days, honestly. But I'm probably going to blast it when I get over to SSB later. I'm going to keep it down while I'm doing FT8, because it turns out I was experimenting a little bit earlier, and the new antenna I'm using does overheat a bit when you throw too much power at it on FT8. That's very common. That may be more complex than you want to think about right now, so don't think about it. Anything I talk about, you don't know what I'm talking about, just let it flow by you. Just let it go. You can ask questions in the comments. At some point, I will talk about all of this in more detail. Today's not about detail. Today is about, this is the first time I'm actually recording myself doing this and trying to introduce you to what I want to do and how I do things. I like to log on a laptop or a tablet. I find logging on a phone to be a little too tight, a little too small, even though I've got a huge phone. And I find paper logging difficult because my handwriting is crap. So I do everything on a computer anyway. And then over here, this tiny thing over here is an antenna tuning unit. And you don't always need this if you're using resonant antennas. And again, if you don't really know what that means, we'll get to it another time. But I'm using an N7DCC random wire, so I need the tuner. This is actually the first time this tuner is coming out of the box. I just received it this week. I've got a couple of other tuners I could use, but this one's nice and small, and it'll go well with some of my smaller radios, which I might show off later. But right now I'm going with the big radio plus the little tuner, and honestly, so far, it's working great. All right, that took me a minute. Here we go. We've got a jackkite mast. The masts they make are actually technically for flying windsocks or kites, but they work great for wire antennas. This is a 28-foot mast. I'm going to see if I can track up and give you a sense of that. But it goes right up into the trees here, which is one reason I was having some trouble actually finding it. And then at the top of that, I've got a little loop of rope is also knotted onto a line of yellow wire. The wire comes down to just a simple fence post and comes into this endpoint here. The endpoint here is a dually. I'll have a link in the description below. And the reason it's called a dually is on one side we have the transformer, a 9-to-1 transformer for a random wire antenna. This is 35 feet of wire, which is good up to 40 meters, at least in theory. On the underside here, we've got a 49-to-1 transformer, which would be for an N7DCC half wave, which I don't have the right length of wire with me, but that's okay, because that's not what I'm doing today. I'm playing with this random wire. I built this from a kit. I cut the wire here myself, and then the other wire we've got going on here, we have a counterpoise. And this counterpoise is 17 feet long, and it's a linked counterpoise that I actually built to use with a completely different kind of antenna, to use with a raised vertical antenna as a raised, tuned counterpoise, rather than a ground plane counterpoise. And this is going just to another fence post right over there. Very simple setup. This, I've already tested it. This is getting me all over the continental US on digital right now. I've already made some contacts before I started recording. So this works. And this, as you can see, is simple. And if you don't feel up to building something like this, you don't have to, because first of all, there's a dozen ways you can buy an antenna. You can also buy transformers like this, and then just cut wires the right length, and voila, you have an antenna. You just need a way to get it in the air. So what's my big takeaway right now? My big takeaway right now is, if you are interested in this hobby, I will put some of the resources you can get to learn this hobby. It's really not that hard. And once you get on the air, you're going to find that it just gets easier and easier. Like everything else, when you're doing it, you learn. To get your license, you need to know certain things, absolutely. But most of the real learning is going to take place when you're out here in the field. Oh, that's right. Speaking of being in the field, I was going to show you a little more of Fort Snelling. State Park, that is. This is not actually the fort. The fort is near here. This place is just named after it. So I'm in the parking lot, and the great thing about the Fort Snelling parking lot, the one I'm at anyway, which is over by the beaches, is that it's divided into these bays. There's like, I don't know, 10 of them. And between each bay are these big medians, which is pretty great. Because I can set up my antenna here on the median, and I'm not going to bother anybody. Nobody is going to try to run through this median. It's all full of undergrowth and twigs and stuff. No one's running through here. No one's walking their dog through here. Once someone's dog got away from him and he decided to go through the median. Other than that, no one traipses through the medians here. So it is actually kind of perfect for this kind of setup. And it's green, and it's shaded, and it's really, really, I don't know, I just really like it here. Is it the most picturesque? No, because I'm standing on asphalt right now. But I can do almost everything I want to do, and I don't get bothered. And today is a beautiful day. It's like 76 degrees, and the humidity is low for the first time in God knows how long. And this is a great day to be outside. And one of the reasons I took up this hobby was to give me more excuses to be outside. And so, like, you can see this side of what is ostensibly beach property, there's no one here, even though it's a beautiful day. They're all on another part by the parking bays that are closer to the entrance of the park. And one reason for that is the beach itself is closed right now. There was a lot of flooding here at the park. The park was closed for about 6 weeks. And the lake or pond or whatever, I think it's technically part of the Mississippi River, isn't safe to swim in. So the beach is closed. And of course, during the winter time, hardly anyone's over here for the same reason. No one's swimming. And even during the spring, I found this place was mostly, like, it's never full. I've never seen this parking lot actually full. So it's a great place to operate all around. And the rangers seem to know what we're doing, which is awesome. So anyway, I think I've rambled enough, but I think this gives you a sense of what I'm hoping to do with this channel. It gives you a sense of what I'm doing today. I might actually record a little bit later and talk a little more about the operation, especially about how the antenna works. But now I'm going to go play some radio, and I will see you all on the other side. So I've been sitting playing on FT8 for the last couple hours. I've long since made my activation. To activate a park on Parks on the Air, you only need 10, and I have something like 25. And I did it across multiple bands. So the new antenna, the N-Fed random wire, is working. It's working well. I'm going to get on voice in a little while and see how it works there, but I expect it's going to work well there too. To give you some idea of how well it worked, other than how many contacts I make, there's a tool called pskreporter.info, and there's what they call a reverse beacon network. It basically listens for digital and CW signals and maps them. And it doesn't necessarily mean you made a contact with somebody. It just means that a station whose job it is to listen for people heard you. And I'm going to spin around. So that is what PSK Reporter has to say about my last 2 hours across several different bands. You can see I got a little bit into Europe. I got a little bit into South America. Not a lot, because I was only running 20 watts, 25 watts. The dually antenna that I'm using, turns out not to like digital modes going much higher than about 20 watts. And that's legitimate. I mean, the digital modes, it's always cool. You want to make contacts, right? You want to make contacts far and wide. But part of the point of the digital modes, especially FT8 and Whisper and so on, is how far can you get on relatively little power? I'm all right with that because I made a lot of contacts. I did not make any DX contacts, but that's okay too. And we're going to see what I can do on voice. I'm going to take a bit of a break in a minute, let some things recharge, actually. I will still come back and talk about what it was like and things like that. So I just finished setting up. I'm mostly set up to do some phone operations and voice operation. I've got these headphones on, which is one reason I'm not going to be recording it. I do not yet have a second transmitter or any good way to record the audio at the same time. Like, this microphone might be good enough if I put it in the right place, but I just don't know, and I'll experiment with that another day. So here I am one more time, Whiskey Delta Zero Oscar Mike, still at Fort Snelling. It's been a long day. Made about a total of, 70 contacts. It wasn't quite enough. Must have been, actually, excuse me, it's more like 50 contacts. Wasn't quite enough. I'm still trying to make some on FT8 before I call it a night, but it is getting late and my battery is dying. So we'll see where I get. But The bands were all up and down. It's that kind of day, meaning that I'd have a signal and then I'd lose it. I was having trouble breaking pileups. I don't know how much of that was the antenna and how much of that was directionality, because the counterpoise lends directionality to things. I really just don't know. And I'm not going to sweat it too much, because it was a lovely day regardless, and I had a good time, and I learned a few things, and that's what it's all about. And I got to talk to you, whoever you turn out to be, and that's also not a bad thing at all. I'm going to be going down to Frontenac State Park tomorrow, and I'll be recording while I'm down there too. And then I'm going to edit these all and get these up eventually, and you'll see them. So I wanted to contextualize what was exciting about today. I missed my goal. One of my goals was I wanted to reach 1,000 contacts at Fort Snelling. I made a total of 62, I think, and that fell short. I needed a few more, and the battery died before I got there. But that's okay, because here's what I did do today. I used an antenna that I built myself. I didn't design any of it myself. I worked entirely from things other people had done, but my own hands built the transformers and soldered them and made the wire antennas. And, you know, one of them was just cutting the wire to the right length, but the other one, because the linked counterpoise, that involved a certain amount of work. I did that myself. And that sounds boastful in some ways, but in other ways, I gotta tell you, I'm not a guy who's all that comfortable with tools. And that's why I wanted to add a Coda to sort of stress that you don't have to be. You don't have to come to this already brilliant with tools, because most of the tools are not that hard to learn how to use. You don't have to come to this used to building things. You'll have plenty of people who will give you examples and give you YouTube videos and all kinds of things that will teach you to build things. I only made 60 contacts or whatever, but I made them on an antenna I built myself. And that feels pretty good. Now tomorrow at Frontenac, I'm probably not going to do that. At Frontenac, I'm probably going to use a very simple setup. I'm probably going to go with a vertical on the roof, because I don't know Frontenac that well, and I just don't know how comfortable I'm going to be setting up in the park itself as opposed to in the parking lot. If I do wind up operating from the car, I've got some things I want to test anyway. I've got some screens for the windows that I want to try putting up. So it's still not the end of the world if I do it that way, because that's also a valid way to operate. There is no one right way to do this. Anyway, I'm going to go find food finally. It is 9:05 Central Time, PM. I've been out here a long time already. It was a beautiful day to be outside. And the truth is, if I did not have ham radio as an excuse to get outside, I'd probably have been in my basement playing video games. I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to sign off. Keep having awesome days wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Whiskey Delta Zero Oscar Mike. 73s.